I wanted to introduce Pengcheng Zhou, PC, who is in Liam Peninsky's lab and has agreed to visit and give us a tutorial about his methods for extracting neurons from calcium imaging data. And his algorithms work great, so I'm really excited to hear what he has to say.
Hello, can you hear me? Back here. Okay, cool. Thanks for the introduction. I'm very excited to give a tutorial on my computational software CNMF-E to extract neurons from microendoscopic data. So it's a tutorial, but I would like to say it's an advertisement. I hope that if you have some similar data, and please try our method, and if you have some friends using the same data recording technique, recommend the CNMF-E to them. Oops. Oh, by the way, first, if you want to follow the tutorial procedure, you can download the CNMF-E and run CNMF-E on your own computer. So today I'm going to talk about how to extract neurons from calcium imaging data using matrix factorization. And the tutorial includes two parts. First, in part one, I'm going to overview methods for extracting neurons from the video data. And I will overview the general methods for calcium imaging data analysis. And also I will focus on microendoscopic data. And we developed a software called CNMF-E to extract neurons from this kind of data. And in the second part is an exercise, so you can follow the tutorial and run CNMF-E on your own computer. And please feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. I think most of you already have some background on calcium imaging. So basically, the idea of doing calcium imaging is to record the intracellular calcium concentration. And it is believed that, and in general, the calcium concentration is closely related to the spiking activity of neurons. So we expect to infer the spiking activity of neurons from the fluorescence intensity of calcium imaging. And so here in these two figures, we show the responses, the changes of the fluorescence in response to action potential. Here there is only one action potential, and here there are 10 action potentials. We see that after we have an action potential, the changes of fluorescence has a sudden change and then decay slowly. So in this way, we can record the fast electrical signal, which is the action potentials, using a slow optical signal, which is the fluorescence intensity. So here is another example showing that simultaneous recording of both electrical signal and optical signal. This is a calcium traces within the neuron RI, and this is the spiking activity of the same neuron. We can see that the calcium signal is closely related to spiking activity. So usually when we analyze the calcium imaging data, the first thing we have to do is called source extraction. Source extraction means identify all neurons within the field of view and extract their temporal activity. So traditionally, there are two main approaches for doing this task. The first one is called RI analysis, and the second one is called matrix factorization approach. So the RI analysis is very straightforward. So we just manually or automatically identify neuron RIs. We draw RI for each neuron, and then we take the average the fluorescence intensity within each RI to get the neural activity. For example, this is a this is a typical way of identifying neuron RIs. So we first compute the correlation image for the given the video data. So because the adjacent pixels within neurons, they share the same neural signal, so the temporal correlation between neighboring pixels has very large local correlation. So you see that for these neurons, the correlation is very high, and for the background pixels, because they don't have the same neural signals, the local correlation is very low. And then we get the local correlation image first. Then we use some segmentation algorithms to segment neuron RIs. And then for each RI, we extract their temporal activity by averaging the fluorescence intensity within each RI. So RI analysis has been used for a very long time and is still widely used right now. However, it may fail in few situations. So for example, when two neurons are spatially overlapped, you see the dendrite of the neuron 2 is overlapping with the neuron 1. So if we identify a RI of neuron 1 here and we extract the mean fluorescence intensity of neuron 1, some signals of neuron 2 will sneak into neuron 1's activity. So these two neuron signals are mixed together. So what we get is not individual neurons activity, it's a mixed neuron activity. So this could be a problem. And so in this example, I show that within a neuron RI, the fluorescence intensity includes signals more than neural signal only. It has some extra signals. So here we have one neuron, and we identify its RI here. And if we take the average fluorescence intensity within this RI, what we get is this way. It looks so noisy and it's unlikely to be a neural signal. This is because the fluorescence trace within this RI, it has neural signals, and also it has some background fluctuations. And the background fluctuation is so large that we couldn't see any neural signals here. So a typical way of estimating this background fluctuation is take an annular region surrounding this neuron, the blue one here, and we compute the average fluorescence intensity of all pixels within this annular region. And this is the estimated background. And when we subtract this estimated background from the fluorescence intensity within the RI, and we get neural signals here. So this example shows that if the fluorescence intensity includes extra signals, the RI analysis will fail. So the other approach for cell extraction is based on matrix factorization. So matrix factorization approach is based on two observations. So the first observation is that the recorded video data is a superimposition of all neurons' spatial temporal activity. So that's neuron 1, neuron 2, neuron 3. And all these neurons' spatial temporal activity, plus some background signal, plus some observation noise. This is one observation for matrix factorization. And the other observation is that the spatial temporal activity of one neuron can be represented as a product of a spatial shape times the temporal activity. So what I mean here is that among all frames, the neuron shape is unchanged. The fluorescence intensities according to the neural activity. So when the neural activity is high, the fluorescence intensity here is also high, but the neural shapes is unchanged. So mathematically, this is called Rank-1 decomposition. So before converting these two observations into the mathematical formulas, I want to mention how do we represent video data how do we represent 3D video data in matrix factorization approach? So for 3D video data like this, we usually represent it as a matrix. So here for each frame, it's an image, and we convert this image into a vector, and the number of elements of this vector is the number of pixels. And for video data with the t frames, we have t vectors, and when we put them together, it's a matrix. It's a very big matrix. The dimension of this matrix is d by t. D is the number of pixels, t is the number of frames. This is how we represent video data in matrix factorization approach. So now we're going to write down the mathematical formula for these two observations. So first, the observation data y. This is the video data we recorded. It's the sum of neuron 1's spatial temporal activity, neuron 2's spatial temporal activity, plus neuron k, the k neuron's spatial temporal activity, under the background observation noise. So all the yi to yk and b and e have the same dimension as y, as the video data you have. And also for the spatial temporal activity of each neuron, yi, is represented as a column vector ai times the row vector ci, transpose of ci. So ai is an image, so it's a vector, and the ci is another vector represents the fluorescence intensity of each neuron. You can think it as a calcium concentration for each neuron. So we can put these two equations into one. So we replace yi as ai times cit, and we can then concatenate all ai and ci into a matrix A and C. So we will get this formula, y is equal times c plus b and e. B is the background, e is the noise. So this is how A and C look like. So A is a matrix with a dimension d by k. D is the number of pixels. K is the number of pixels. So for each column, it's a vector with d elements, and so it's a vector with d elements is an image. So given this vector, you can get the spatial shape of each neuron. So C is also a matrix. The dimension of C is t by k. K by t. So each row is a temporal activity of one neuron. So given this model, if we can find A and C that satisfy specific conditions, we're able to get neuron locations and the neural activities simultaneously. That means if we have A and C simultaneously, so A will give you the neuron shapes, C will give you the neural activity. And compared with RI analysis, this matrix factorization has these two advantages. So it can do two things together. You don't have to use a two-step procedure. And by two-step procedure, I mean in RI analysis, you have to identify neuron locations first. Then you extract neural activity. But here you can do both things together. And also it is a, oops, I'm sorry. Secondly, it is able to okay, so the second advantage is that it is able to demix neural signals that are spatially overlapped. For example, we have for the same pixel, the fluorescence intensity we get is a 1 row of A times 1 at one frame. It's one row of A times one column of C. So fluorescence intensity of each pixel at each frame is a weighted sum of all neurons' activity. So in this way, we can demix neuron signals separately. So in other words, matrix factorization approach allows neurons to be overlapped and can demix these neurons' activity. So considering these advantages, matrix factorization approach sounds like too good to be true. However, there are three things we have to keep in mind. So first, finding A and C is not easy. It requires some realistic constraints on model variables. By model variables, here I mention A, the neuron shapes, C, the neural activity, and B, the background. And the quality of cell extraction depends on two things. The first is how realistic are these constraints are. So if the constraints are not realistic, what the extracted components may not corresponding to real neuron. They may just some garbage components. And secondly, it depends on how well we can estimate AC given these constraints. So if you put a very complicated constraints to our model variables, but you couldn't identify, you couldn't solve these model variables, then it's nothing. That means if you put too much constraint to the model, you couldn't get the solution, then it's not helpful. So there are several formulations of matrix factorization approaches, and here I want to highlight two of them. So the first one is called PCIC analysis, and to my knowledge, this is the first method using matrix factorization. So the whole idea of decomposing a video data into a spatial matrix times a temporal matrix is from this paper. And so the idea of PCIC is that neuron shapes and the temporal activities are spatially and temporally independent. So I will explain what does it mean here, spatially and temporally independent. So for example, we have two neurons, and they are not spatially overlapped. So the correlation between their spatial shapes are independent. So they are not overlapped. So the spatial is zero. And for the temporal independent here, they assume that these two neurons fire spikes. These two neurons have their temporal activity independently, which means their temporal correlation is zero. So they use they use ICA method to find all independent components, and each independent component corresponds to one neuron. And the other approach is called CNMF. It's a constraint non-negative factorization. It can simultaneously demix, denoising, deconvolution, denoising, deconvolving, and demixing calcium imaging data. And I will discuss the details in following slides. And there are some other formulations here, but if you're interested, you can read their papers. I'm not going to talk about them here. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, this is a very good question. So the question is that if the spatial temporal activity couldn't be composed into a rank 1 matrix, that means the neuron shapes is not a constant. In some frames, the dendrite will have a large fluorescence intensity, while in other frames they are not. Is that your question? Yeah. And I think in this case, rank 1 is clearly not good enough. So maybe we have to decompose this. We have to decompose the spatial temporal activity of this neuron into a rank 2 matrix. So one rank models the soma, and the other rank models the dendrite. I'm sorry. Yes. Yes, they have separate components. And here's the model for constrained and negative matrix factorization. So this is the model. Y is equal to AC plus B plus C. I will keep reminding you what's the meaning of these model variables. A is the neuron shapes, C is the neuron activity, B is the background, and E is the Gaussian white noise. And as I mentioned, that to get A and C, we have to put some realistic constraint to model variables. So the model variable, the constraints on model variables in CNMF-E are shown here. So both the spatial and the temporal are negative. This is because this is due to the physical interpretation of A and C. So we want to get negative pixels and we want to get negative spikes. So A and C should be non-negative. By the way, in PCIC, they didn't put this constraint. So in lots of data analysis, people get some negative spikes. That's not the real thing. It's a kind of an artifact. And the spatial components are localized and compact. So that means the spatial shape of each neuron is only within a small area. It's not in the whole field of view. And the temporal component, the temporal activity of each neuron obeys the dynamics of calcium indicator. So given the fluorescence intensity, you know that after we have one calcium transient, the fluorescence intensity increases suddenly and then decays slowly. So we can model this dynamics. So in this way, we can remove some observation noise. So the calcium dynamics is modeled as ARP model, autoregressive model. So here P is the order of AR model, and usually P is selected as 1 or 2. And the spiking signals are sparse. That means you're not going to get lots of spikes in the whole. You only have some sparse calcium transients, sparse calcium events. So CNMF has been successfully applied to many datasets and successful applications in the original paper of CNMF. And I want to make some comments on CNMF. So first of all, it's a general framework for analyzing calcium imaging data. It provides a general model of the data. And the implementations to different data sets may require extra constraints. That means the current implementation of CNMF-E is optimized for 2-photon data or lattice microscopic data. But maybe when you have others, the model is not realistic, so you have to change the model constraints. And estimating A and C is a non-trivial optimization problem. So given if you add some new constraints, you have to you have to propose your own algorithm to solve it. And finding a reasonable solution needs a good initialization method. So because the optimization problem here is non-convex, and without good initialization, you couldn't get good results, or it may take you a very long time to get a converged results. So in the second part, I will show you an application of CNMF on microendoscopic data. So this is a very good example supporting my conclusion here. So if you want to apply CNMF to a new data set, if the model is not realistic, you have to change the model, and you have to propose a new optimization problem. And also you have to find a new initialization algorithm. First, I will show you what is microendoscope. So it uses implanted lens to deliver light into and out of deep brain areas. And a miniaturized microscope is mounted to the head of the animal. The microscope is very light. It's only 1.9 gram. So the animal can move freely and can freely behaving, and you can record the population neural activity using this system. Here we use a miniaturized microscope to record the neural activity while the animal is freely behaving. This is a very useful technique because we can make a direct connection between unconstrained behavior and the population neural activity. However, the data quality of endoscope is very bad, and this is how they look like. And I think some of you may do 2-photon imaging data, and you have seen some data like that. This is very bad because it has very large background. It has very large background, and these backgrounds are fluctuating. It's not temporally constant, and simply subtract a mean to remove them. And also neurons are spatially overlapped. This is because microendoscope is a 1P image, a 1-photon image. So light in the brain tissues are blurred, and the neuron shapes in the imaging plane is much larger than their real size. And also we have very low signal-to-noise ratio here. That's why CNMF-E came. So we modify the CNMF to specifically tackle the problem of extracting neurons from microendoscopic data. This is how we model, how we assume the data look like. Here is how we think of fluorescence in microendoscopic data are composed of. So it's composed of neural signals and also have these three components. So it has a lot of local background. So local background usually come from out of focus light. So in this focal plane, neurons are in this focal plane. But you also record some signals from planes above or lower this focal plane. And because of the blurring, the shapes is usually much larger than neurons in the focal plane. And they contribute as a contaminating signal. And also there are some blood vessels. And also some global fluctuation. For example, the shift in Z-plane, the bleaching, they're kind of, so all pixels in the field of view, they share this global fluctuation. And compared with the plain CNMF, CNMF-E contains following modifications: a new background model, and a new optimization algorithm, and a new initialization. I will explain them one by one. First, I'll mention how plain CNMF model the background. So usually the background is modeled as a rank 1 AMF. So it has a vector B, and a vector the B is the spatial component of this background source, and F is the temporal component of this background fluctuation. So the assumption here is that all pixels within the field of view share the same background fluctuations. This is the idea. But in microendoscopic data, it has it has multiple sources of background fluctuations. As I mentioned here, it has, for each local background is one source of background, and we also that's on the global background. So the background component here, the fluctuation, it is more than rank 1. It is a high rank matrix. It has multiple sources. So rank 1 matrix, rank 1 MF doesn't work here. And it's true that we can increase the rank of B here. For example, we can make B a matrix, this B a matrix. We have multiple components, and F is also a matrix here has multiple components. But when we increase the rank of B, some neural signals can also be explained in B. So some neural signals will sneak into the background component. So this is not a good way of separating neural signals from the background. So, so CNMF, the plain CNMF will fail in microendoscopic state. And here I will mention our new model of the background in microendoscopic state. We first decompose the background fluctuation into two components. The first one is only the fluctuating background. So that means how the fluorescence intensity fluctuates over time. And also a constant baseline. So for each pixel, the baseline is stable. It doesn't change over time. And next, so the temporal mean of the fluctuating is 0 because we move all constant baselines to be 0 here. And this is a key part of CNMF-E. We use a ring model to model the background. Here's the idea. So we made the assumption that the background fluctuation at each pixel can be represented as a linear combination of its neighboring pixels fluctuation. I will repeat it again because it seems not easy to understand. So the background fluctuation at each pixel can be represented as a linear combination of its neighboring pixels fluctuation. This is true. Maybe it's not. We assume this is true because each pixel and its neighbors share the same background fluctuation. So if they share the same background fluctuation, it's just a linear transformation. We can use a linear model to represent for example, the background fluctuation at the pixel I, the center pixel. It's some combination of multiple sources. It's a combination of fluctuations from multiple background sources. And its neighboring pixel, BJT, J is a pixel J. It's also a linear combination of background fluctuations of multiple sources. And they share the same background sources. So we can use some linear model to represent a BIT, FA means fluctuating, as a linear combination of BJT. So here we have to be careful of selecting neighboring pixels. So here we select the pixels on this ring. The distance between the center pixel and its neighbors is L, and L is the maximum diameter of a neuron. Why did we make this assumption? Why do we make this selection? That's because if the maximum size of the neuron is L, this pixel and this pixel, they are not going to belong to the same neuron. So they don't share the neural signal, but they share the background signal. That's the idea. Any questions on this? Yeah, it is out of focus light, but we couldn't see some clear calcium transient, and also it may be superposition of multiple neurons activity, and it's too complicated to identify those neurons. We just say that all these signals are background. We just put them into the background, and we're not going to identify those neurons and extract their activity. Yeah, they're located here. But for example, if we have a neuron on this here, and this one neuron in the center of this ring, and they only share the background, but they don't share the neural signal. And if we use this model to fit the background, only the shared background can be explained. But the neural signal, because they are not shared, they couldn't be explained in this regression. That's the idea. So we only, any question?
So then
If two neurons are highly correlated, that could be a problem. But in practice, we didn't see example like that. Yeah, because two neurons, they still have, they're not perfectly correlated. Let me repeat this again. So, yeah. Value L is the diameter of a neuron. Oh, you have to choose this value. And in practice, the of, I will tell you how to select the L. This model, only the background fluctuation is shared between this pixel and the neighboring pixels. And this regression model, only the background is explained. And we can recover the background signal and remove the neural signals from the data. Here is an example. So we have one neuron here, and we're going to estimate the background at this pixel, the green pixel. This is the fluorescence intensity at this pixel. And we select its neighbors here. So it's the distance between this the center pixel and its neighbors is much larger than the diameter of the neuron. And these are some example fluorescence traces for these neighboring pixels. And so we fit a regression problem. We get Wij here, and BJT is the fluorescence signal for pixels at this ring. And once we get Wij here, we use the right-hand side as our estimation of the background signal. Here the blue one is our estimated background, and the yellow one is the true background signal. They are perfectly with each other. And if we subtract this estimated background from the fluorescence trace, we get a neural signal here. That means this background model separates the neural signal and the background, separates the neural signals from the background, and we can accurately get an estimation of background. Yeah, this is simulation. We have ground truth. And here, this is a comparison between CNMF-E and the rank 1 MF model used in plain MF. So when you have lots of background sources from 2 to 100, the rank 1 MF model, oh, by the way, the y-axis is the mean correlation between the estimated background and the ground truth. When you have more background sources, the mean correlation for rank 1 MF model deteriorates quickly, and that means when we have lots of background sources, like in the case of microendoscopic data, rank 1 MF model doesn't work. But for CNMF-E, even though we have 100 neurons, the performance are still very stable. And also the computational cost for fitting a background model with 2 background sources and with 100 background sources are the same. We're just doing regression for each pixel. Some people may say rank 1 MF model is not good, so we can use a higher order MF model, high rank MF model. So in this simulation, I fix the number of backgrounds at 20, and then I use a high rank MF model. So the rank of MF was selected from 5 to 25. You can see the performance of high rank MF model is always inferior to CNMF-E. And also, same number of MF rank, we run it for 10 trials, and for each trial, the results are different. It's relatively stochastic because the MF is not global. It's not a convex optimization problem. So for each, the result depends on the initialization. But when we analyze the data, we don't want to get stochastic results. We want to get very stable results. So for these two examples, I show that the background model in CNMF-E can work well when we have multiple sources of the background. And the plain MF doesn't work even though we increase the rank of the background. So this is a summary of the summary of CNMF-E model. So these are constraints to neurons, and these are constraints to background. And for this background term, they are the changes we made based on CNMF, and they are key for CNMF. They are the key for the success of CNMF-E in analyzing microendoscopic data. So next, we are going to talk about how to estimate the model variables. I mean, we have a model, but our goal is to get our estimation of A and C. A is the neural, C is the temporal activity. So this is a formulated optimization problem here. Maybe some of you are not familiar with the optimization problem, but don't worry. I'm not going to talk about the details of this optimization problem. What you have to know is we want to update these four variables, A, C, W, and B0, to minimize this objective function. This objective function is the residual sum of squares of y after subtracting neural signals, after subtracting neural signals and the background. And here and also to get these these four variables have some constraints here. So in this optimization problem, we didn't estimate BF, the fluctuating background directly. We estimate the weight matrix W here. And once we have all these variables, we can estimate a BF in this way. So BF is a fluctuating background. This problem is a non-convex problem, and solving it is very hard, and it's a question. Okay, so the question is the computational complexity for this optimization problem, and the answer is I don't know, because I'm not going to solve this problem directly. I'm going to divide it into 3 subproblems. Yes. So A and S are sparse. Here I didn't explicitly say what's the I didn't explicitly say how we enforce the sparsity of these two variables, but in the following subproblems, people can put different sparsity constraints to A and S, and that means they can use different algorithms to estimate A and C and put some constraints there. Yeah, you can pick a different one, and this is one modular of model. This is one modular of solving this optimization problem. If you can try different algorithm, and yes, in the current CNMF-E implementation, we have some selected algorithms, and in the tutorial, I will mention them. Answer your question? Yeah, because there are several algorithms. I want to give users flexibility to choose the algorithm they like. So the 3 subproblems are estimating A given C and B and B0. That means we fix the neural temporal activity, fix the background, and we only update the neuron shapes. And this problem is estimating neural activities by fixing the background and the neuron shapes. And this one is fixing neural signals, fixing neuron shapes and the neural temporal activity, and then update the background. So for all these 3 subproblems, it can be easily solved. And by iteratively update variables C, A, and B, we can solve the optimization problems here. And regarding the computational complexity, all these are scaled linearly with the number of pixels and the number of frames. So I will skip the details of solving these three subproblems, and if you are interested, you can read our manuscript or send me an email. And the strategy of dividing the large optimization problem into three subproblems has another advantage, because we can put some interventions to we can put some interventions in the optimization procedure. For example, you identify some neurons having weird neuron shapes, and you can, based on your knowledge of neuron shapes, you can say this is not a real neuron. You can delete it, for example here. Once you get a neuron shape after updating spatial shapes A here, you say this neuron is not good. You can delete them and then run this iteration again. So there are several types of interventions. The first one is you can merge neurons. If one neuron is split into multiple components, you can merge them based on their temporal correlation or based on their spatial distance. And but in some cases, several neurons are merged into one component. For example, if two neurons have a high temporal correlation, they are merged into one neuron. But based on the morphology of neuron shapes, you can split them into two components and then run iteration again. And also we can remove some false positives. We can sometimes in the initialization procedure, we didn't initialize all neurons, and we can pick them from the residual. So the question is how do we do splitting here? And actually, the solution is not as complicated as you mentioned. We just manually segmented two RIs, and we assume that they have the same temporal activity right now, but they have different spatial shapes. In the next, for updating model variables, they will get their own temporal activity in the next iteration. The question is how to merge components that have dendrites, neuron dendrites. So this assumes that neurons, the cell bodies and the dendrites share the same temporal activity. Is that true in your data?
Let's say it's similar.
Oh, okay, similar. Okay. If they were close, we can just merge them based on their temporal activity. So we have multiple components for this neuron. Some components correspond to cell body and some correspond to neuron dendrites. And they have their own temporal activity. And because they have the temporal activity are very similar, the temporal correlation between them are high. Then you can merge them into one. You sum the spatial temporal activity of all these all these components, and then do a rank 1 MF. Do rank 1 MF because you assume that they have the same temporal activity. Oh, yeah. Your concern is that in the estimation of the background, because the dendrite is too long, it's larger than the ring size, and the neural signal may be explained in the background. That's your concern, right? And the answer is that if this is a real neuron and you just mistakenly segment it into multiple components, so there is only one neuron, but you have multiple components. You just mistakenly split them, and in this step, when we estimate a BF, we subtract these neural signals from the raw data. So they are just when we subtract the neural signal of all these segments, they are not in they're not here anymore. I mean, the neural signal has been subtracted. So in your estimation of BF, it won't be a problem in that case. I will talk with you later, but yes, yeah. And the next one is the initialization. We know we already have a method for updating model variables, but as I mentioned, that the initialization is very important for solving this optimization problem. And this initialization procedure we used in CNMF-E. The idea is that since the background dominates the raw fluorescence data, and we couldn't extract the neural signal because the background is so large. So we have to remove the background. So here I used a high-pass filter to remove the background. The filter has a Gaussian shape, and it's just a two-dimensional Gaussian. And then I subtract the mean of this Gaussian kernel. And when I apply this when filter the raw data with this Gaussian kernel, the low background, the low spatial frequency background term will be removed, what we get is the filter data only include the filter data is dominated by neural signals only. For example, we have this pixel, and the fluorescence trace of this pixel in this filter data set is like this. So it has the same temporal profile as the neural activity. So based on this observation, we can estimate neural activity just by taking the fluorescence trace of the filter data directly. And for one neuron, we have the temporal activity already. So next step is to get the spatial shape of this neuron. So to do this, we first crop a small region. We first crop a small region in this area and put them here. And in this small area, we assume that the fluorescence intensity of each pixel has the three components. So it has a neural signal, and also it has a fluctuating background signal. So the background is only rank 1 within this small area, and also has a constant baseline. So signals already, and the constant baseline, we don't have to estimate a temporal component for constant baseline, it's just a number 1. And so here we have to find the fluctuating background. We do this by get the median of neighboring pixels. So in this area we have one neuron, and we just pick these pixels surrounding this neuron and compute the median of all these pixels as our estimation of background fluctuation. So then we do a regression. We regress this video data into these three components: neural signal, background, and constant baseline. So the regression weight corresponding to neural signal gives you the spatial shape of the neuron. So another question is that how here we get the temporal activity of this neuron because this pixel is in the center of that neuron. It's called a seed pixel. The question is how to detect these seed pixels. So here we compute a correlation image from the filter data, and we also get the peak-to-noise ratio image. So for seed pixel in the center, usually the seed pixel has to be in the center of a neuron. It has a high local correlation because this pixel shares the same neural signal with its neighbor, so the local correlation is high. And also because the neuron has a large calcium transient, so the peak to the noise ratio is also high. So we can use this method identify seed pixels and then initialize neurons. So here is a video showing how initialization. We find one seed pixel, we get the temporal spatial shapes and temporal activities. And then we subtract the spatial temporal activity of these initialized neurons and find the next seed pixel. So this is a greedy initialization method. In the end, we can detect all neurons. We can initialize all neurons from the raw video data. So to summarize, the pipeline the pipeline for running CNMF-E on microendoscopic data has following modulars. First, we have to initialize A and C, as shown in the previous video. And then we update B given A and C. So A and C we get A and C from the initialization. So we update B is the background by solving the third optimization problem, fix A and C, update B. And then we can update temporal activity given A and C, update spatial component given B and C, and we also have some interventions. So we just iteratively do all these modulars, and finally we will get a good result in the end. I'm sorry? This one? Oh, here. Yeah, it's negative because you have the spatial filter you applied to the raw data has some negative values. So for example, there are two pixels here, two neurons here, and when you convolve it with a kernel with some negative values, this pixel has some contribution to this pixel, and the contribution weight is negative. And this negative contribution will get negative values at this pixel. But when you apply the negative constraints, it will be removed. Yeah. So when I try to update C, I use the raw data. It's not from the spatially filtered data. So the raw data has all positive values. So here, the temporal trace here you get is from the spatially filtered data. It's not the raw data. The raw data is always positive. Here, this one has some negative values because the filtering kernel is negative. And you only use this filter data to get the shape of the temporal activity. Yeah. But after you get the temporal activity, you use the raw data to get the spatial shape. In that case, all pixel values are positive. Sure. This is a whole pipeline for running CNMF-E. And here I will show some results of CNMF-E in analyzing simulation data. And I compare the results with the widely used PCIC approach. So because we use simulation, we have ground truth. And we compare the spatial similarity between the true neural shapes and the estimated neuron shapes. And we also compute the temporal similarity between the true temporal activity and the estimated neural activity. So for the red is PCICA. So for PCICA, it has both low spatial similarity and temporal similarity. That means PCICA doesn't give you accurate extraction of neuron shapes and neural activity. And here the black is the initialization results of CNMF-E. We can see that the initialization itself is already better than PCICA, the black dots here. It has a high spatial and temporal similarities. But if we run CNMF-E to iteratively update model variables, we get better results, the red line here, the red dots. Here we also show some results of CNMF, which uses a rank one. Here I use a high rank MF model. And we see that CNMF results is worse than CNMF-E. And also it's worth to mention that we use the ground truth at initialization of CNMF method. So the idea is that if, question? Okay, so if the idea is that if we use initialization, we use the ground truth at the initialization of CNMF because the initialization procedure in CNMF doesn't work. And here we use the ground truth at the initialization. We expect to see, the initialization point is, the starting point is already good enough. So for CNMF, you just keep the results and don't make any changes. But actually for CNMF, even though you gave CNMF a good starting point, you still change the value of these model variables and make the results worse. So then this is because the model of CNMF is not enough. And here, I also show some pairwise correlation between neurons. So in most data analysis, people care about how the pairwise correlation changes in different tasks or different stages. And because of PCIC let neural activity to be statistically independent, thus the temporal correlation between PCIC traces are 0 because they're independent, and this is enforced by PCIC algorithm, which could be a problem. And we also see that most PCIC traces has large Gaussian white noise. We think that maybe if we threshold the value of these traces with a 3 standard deviation to remove those Gaussian white noise, and we only keep the calcium transient, maybe we can get better estimation of correlation. This one? Yeah, individual neurons. We simulated 200 neurons, and for each neuron we see for each estimate the spatial similarity between the ground truth and the estimated neuron shapes. Higher spatial similarity compared with what? You get better. Yeah, higher compared with PCIC. Oh, we don't know why. Because they are different values. One of them is shape, and the other one is the temporal traces. So they're not comparable, I think. I mean, the spatial similarity and the temporal similarity, we don't have to compare these two metrics. We just have to compare the spatial similarity between different users. Yeah, I ran them in the same optimization. I think when you try to extract spatial shapes and temporal activity, so the spatial shape, maybe one value is less sensitive to the noise, and the other one is more sensitive to the noise. I mean, you add some noise. Maybe the spatial similarity doesn't change too much, but the temporal similarity changes a lot after you add in some noise. So back to the pairwise correlation here. So even when we subtract the Gaussian white noise, we only use the thresholding to use the large calcium transient to estimate the pairwise correlation of PCIC traces. They are still not capable of recovering the true pairwise correlation. So the x-axis is the true pairwise correlation, and the y-axis is the estimated pairwise correlation. Well, for CNMF-E, I think it does a pretty decent job. This is true, and this is the estimate. And also CNMF-E is robust to noise compared to PIC analysis. So we reduce the signal to noise ratio by increase the noise level. And when the signal to noise ratio is low, PCIC method miss the loss of neurons. CNMF-E can still identify neurons. And also the spatial similarity of neurons estimated in CNMF-E doesn't change too much when we increase the signal, when we reduce the signal to noise ratio, but PCIC does a very bad job. And here is the temporal similarity, CNMF-E and this PCIC. And also here, we run CNMF-E, but we remove the constraint to calcium dynamics. That means we don't denoising anymore. We just return the temporal tracer directly. And in low signal to noise ratio settings, the temporal similarity decays if you don't include deconvolution step. Here is an example. This is a true neural signal, and extracted neural signal using PCIC. And here, the cyan color represents CNMF-E result without denoising. I mean, you didn't include the calcium dynamics into the model. And the red one is the CNMF result with deconvolution and to remove the noise. There is another application of CNMF-E in vivo PFC data. The video data we have, and we identify all these neurons. For these neurons, by the way, this image is a correlation image, and I look at these pixels in detail, and I found they don't have high peak to noise ratio. That means they are spatially correlated, but they don't have large calcium transients, so they are not identified as a neuron. And if they are neuron, we can still manually or automatically pick these neurons in CNMF-E and run one more iteration to update model variables.